Okay, so today's training is on the Nexus Contacts module. Okay, just quickly before we start, I'll just give you a rundown in case some people don't know who I am. My name is Simon. I'm a developer with ETQ, and I've been here for about 5 years now. Also assisting with the production is Jamie, and helping out running things, obviously, as you know, is Pam. So if you hear someone butt in, it's probably going to be Jamie, and he'll also be fielding some of the questions that you might have. Obviously, there is the Q&A pane, so if you have any questions during the presentation, just send a message through on that pane. There's a little question mark bubble in the top right. Just send the question through, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout the presentation, and then we'll cover them at the end. I'll go through them all. Okay, and also if you are having any other troubles or technical difficulties, feel free to send us a message that way, or give us a call on the normal support line if you still can't hear us or have any other issues. But otherwise, let's go ahead and begin. Okay, so basically the aim of this training is to give users understanding in the Nexus Contacts module, as well as the electronic delivery module. Okay, so what is the contacts module, in case you're not sure? And I do apologize if some of this is familiar to you, but we'll try and cover as much as we can to make sure everyone is up to speed with all the functionality available. The contacts module basically takes the information you can get on the debtors master file, or the creditors master file, or employee file. It takes the contact information that's there and extends that out to give you a lot more flexibility and functionality in terms of the number of contacts you can have, the number of data points you can have, such as phone numbers, emails, addresses, etc. The contacts module allows a large amount of data there, and a lot of potential use there as well. Okay, the electronics module we'll cover in the second half. The electronic module is to do with delivery of reports within Nexus. So for certain configured reports within Nexus, we have the ability to send them out to sort of a user specified output. So that could be to email, which is the most popular, or that could be to printer or to fax. Okay, and it allows you to configure that per contact, or sorry, per debtor. So we'll cover that in the second half. The other things we'll cover will be maintaining the contacts, obviously, exporting contacts for review, okay, and then we'll go into the configuring reports for electronic delivery, how to specify specific contacts to receive things such as statements and invoices. Okay, we will go over the branch rules in terms of electronic delivery and how to set them up and what they are. And then we're going to look into how to understand the rules and the results of that, and reviewing the emails that came out of Nexus. And then lastly, we're going to touch on email templates and sender addresses and configuration, things like that. I do want to point out that we're running Nexus 10 here. So what you're seeing in front of you is Nexus 10 system. Most of the functionality available in the contacts module was introduced in 9 and 9.5, and some of it in 10. So if you're on any of those versions, you should have a lot of that, particularly 9.5 for the electronic. Okay, so let's get started now. What we'll do first is we're going to take a look at the contact information available in the debtors master file. So obviously that's accessible from debtors master maintenance. We're going to pick on Debtor Eagle Computer Services Pty Ltd. And as you, I'm sure, are familiar with, there are two contacts available here, contact 1 and contact 2. And some basic information that you can set up: a phone number, 2 phone numbers, in fact, fax, email, and the delivery method. Okay, so that's historically been the amount of contact information that was available in Nexus for some time. And then around about Nexus 9, we wanted to allow you to expand upon that and add some more. And the way that we do that is with the contacts maintenance screen, which is available via the F2 options menu. So when you press F2, the third option here is to maintain the current debtor's contacts. And we're given a nice lovely screen with our beautiful contact cards in a much more nicely presented way. So I want to point out here that contacts 1 and 2 are the same contacts as that's on the master file. Okay, so this is an important fact. Those two contacts are synced to the master file. Okay, in particular, the first two phone numbers, the first email address, and the contact name. So that's important to understand that if you have any other hard-coded reports that are still looking at the master file, or you have any other lookups in terms of data pointing at the master file, those two contacts will be in sync. Okay, so any changes you make in here, once you save, you can reload that master file and those changes will appear there as well. But on top of that, for contacts 1, we can have a bunch of other information. We can have many email addresses, so we're not limited just to one. We can put additional things in here, date of birth, we can put addresses in, so we can have different addresses for each different contact if that was functionality that we required. And yeah, the amount of details there is endless there. So each of these contact cards represents one of the contacts and any data that is associated with it. And as I said, if there is a contact with multiple email addresses, you'll see them appear here as part of a list. Okay, so email number 2 will appear there. And with this email button here, we can actually click on that and straight away start drafting up an email to that particular contact. We also have a map it button for the address information. So if you have a correctly formatted address in there and you do click the map it button, you'll be taken to Google Maps just so that you can start routing to that customer's details, which is very, very handy for understanding directions and things like that. If we double click on one of the contacts, we're taken to the contact details screen. And this is probably the easier view to see when we have multiple emails, multiple phones, multiple mobiles, etc., because it presents them in a nice list there. In addition, we can add some notes to each individual contact. Okay, so we may prefer to nominate someone as a particular contact for something. We might want to make a note of that, and we can do so in the notes section. You'll see at the moment that edit mode is currently disabled. Okay, so if we're in an inquiry screen, it will remain disabled. But because we've come in from the master maintenance screen, we can in fact edit this information and make changes as we need. Etc. So we can also, as in this screen here, add a new mobile number, for instance, if we have another mobile for them, if they're running 2, you can just insert a new line here. Perhaps they have an international number. Add that like that. Okay. So otherwise, most of the details in here are pretty self-explanatory in terms of given name, date of birth, which you might want to use for something, sending out birthday cards, etc. And when you're ready, you can press the Save Changes button. I will make a note that there is a delete button here, and I will go into a little bit more detail on that later as to who can and can't delete contacts. You'll see at the moment it is grayed out, so I'm not able to delete contacts, and there's a control file setting that we can control for that. Okay. So in addition, some other features that you may not be aware of within the contacts module, within this contacts cards here, is the ability to arrange contacts. So if you decide that you need to change the order of these contacts, you can do so. Okay, so we can simply just grab a card, click and hold it to drag and drop, and put it where we like. Those two contacts then swap. And we do also have the ability to drag and drop and put a contact into the contacts number 1 and 2. Okay, and when we do that and save, then that will update on the master file. When you're done arranging, just press Finish Arranging, and that information is updated already. There's no need to save that. If we want to create a new contact, we can do that either by pressing the New Record here, F5, or we can right-click an existing one and clone the contact. That's quite handy if you think some of the details are going to be the same sort of details and you just want to make sure that you add those details, add the new additional details to a new contact. When you're finished, it can be handy just to make sure you load the latest details again, just by reloading that DENA, just to make sure that you get the latest contact as you swapped it. Otherwise, that record may already be in memory, and if you don't do that, you can get them out of sync quite easily. So it's best just to reload that contact to make sure that you have the new position number 1 contact loaded, and that your details don't get out of sync. One thing I will note as well that is important is that if you're a site that likes to update your debtors master file via external sources, just be aware that if you change those contacts information, then that information can become out of sync with the contacts database. So it's best if you're doing a sysread or something like that, just to engage one of our consultants who can help you do that and make sure that the data is in sync. Okay, so that's the point of view from the debtors master maintenance screen. I'll just show you now what I meant in terms of the deletion of contacts, what settings are available to us. First of all, in the control file settings, we have a control file to allow whether contacts can or can't be deleted at all. Okay, in the company and system details on screen 3, we have an option here to allow the deletion of contacts. Likewise, we can actually control each user, whether they can or cannot delete contacts, and that's done in the user access maintenance. So if you use a sys in screen 2, there is an option here to allow deletion of contacts. So we'll just set that to 1. Now, I briefly mentioned that in the debtors master inquiry, we also have options. We have the contact screen available. Obviously, as you'd expect, this is from an inquiry point of view. So when you come into the contacts screen, similar sort of option, I think it's just going to be in a different place, number 4. The arrange contacts is not available. And if we double click a contact, we won't be able to edit or delete or save changes in the inquiry mode. But it is still very, very handy if users are just quickly needing to get some contacts details, they can retrieve them quickly and they can still email and press the map it button. So it's fairly simple to operate and set up these contacts. There is another functionality which makes it quite handy for getting your data right and making sure that you have the correct contact information there, especially if you want to do an audit of your contact information or perhaps email customers to understand what their latest contact information is. What we can do is a contact export. So you may or may not be aware of this contact export. It's quite easy to find this program in the program tree. Just search for contact export. And there it is. We can select the master code type as debtors master, creditors master, or employees master. Enter a range, search to bring up the range of all our debtors. So within here now you can see we have the ability to find a particular debtor and we can just click on one of them to expand it, see the information for contacts 1 and contacts 2. And that can be quite complex because, as we said, you can have unlimited emails and unlimited phone numbers for an unlimited number of contacts. So depending on how much data you've entered will determine how big this is. But nonetheless, if you would like to export that to Excel, that's fairly simple. You can just go File, Save As, and you have a couple of options here. I think the best one is just to select Excel spreadsheet, all data. Save that as contacts. Browse to that file. And you see we have a large amount of data there for all our contacts and all the data in there. So that can be quite handy if you just need to bring that into Excel and you want to search and filter and find your contacts quickly for reaching out to them about updating their details or things like that. At this stage, just due to the nature of the complexity of how the contacts module works and the number of different configurations you can have and data points you can have, there isn't an ability to import them. We do recommend that you just enter that in by the interface at this stage. Okay, so that's most of what we need to know for the contacts part of things at the moment. But the really powerful part of the contacts module and probably the most important part of the contacts module will be the electronic delivery section. Okay, so the electronic delivery gives us the ability to nominate for a given report, let's say invoices, for each individual debtor, we want it to go to contact 1 and contact 3, or even down to actually, they've given us 3 or 4 different emails that they want us to send to, and we can configure all that. And as well as just emailing is the most popular, but as well as just emailing, we can also have that output to the printer, okay, if they prefer a hard copy, or they can do both hard copy printer and fax as well. So really a large amount of flexibility there in the contacts module for electronic delivery, okay? And what that does mean is that we've given you that flexibility in how you want to set it up, but it does mean that you need to get it right in terms of setting up both the branch rules and then the individual rules to get the configuration that works best for your company. So we might start with one example, and what we're going to be looking at doing is invoices, okay? So typically up until now, we've been just sending our invoice as a physical copy with the goods, but we'd like to start setting up electronic delivery to email the customer a copy of the invoice, okay? And in this particular scenario, it is best to wrap your head around and think about what the general case is, what the majority of the cases will be, and what the individual cases will be. So it's sort of the exceptions to the rule, and we have ways of configuring both of those. So what we'll do is we'll just start off with the exception. We have a new debtor who would like to receive an email when they print off an invoice. So just first of all, in this setup, what we want is we still want a copy to go with the goods, okay? And we're always going to want that. We're always going to put an invoice with the goods, and then we want one to go electronic. And we want this to happen automatically at stock invoice update and print time, okay? So the first setup for that would be to go into Forms, Defaults, Maintenance. And we're going to search for stock invoice update and print. Now you'll see currently we just have one output to a printer. And just bear in mind, the printer I'm using for this demonstration is a print to PDF. So that allows me to save a PDF file so that we can see it on the screen rather than have it come out at my printer over there. So if you do see that pop-up come up, that's because of the print to PDF. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a new sequence for the electronic option. So sequence 1, the destination will be electronic. Now it's important to note that you are able to select a printer with the electronic option, okay? And that is because some electronic delivery options will be to go to a printer. So if a printer is configured there, then it will pick up the correct printer. So we'll just save that now. So sequence 0 will print out with our physical copy with our goods. Sequence 1 will be electronic. And what's going to happen is when it hits that electronic option, it's going to look up whatever rules you've configured for electronic delivery. First of all against the debtor, and then second against the branch. Okay, so let's go ahead and configure some rules for our particular debtor that we want to receive an invoice via email for. I'll just open up the debtor's master first of all, and we can have a look at the contact information. The debtor we're going to be picking on is eTechnique, okay, and we have Jamie and Pam as contacts 1 and 2, both with email set up, and they both have a preferred delivery method of E at the moment. Okay, we'll just take a look at the contacts cards as well. Okay, so we have a Jamie, Pam, and a contact number 3 is a Simon one as well. So this is set up to be my contact details there, and that has my email address there. And again, you'll notice I have a preferred delivery method of E. This is quite important now at this stage, this preferred delivery method. The available options are E, F, and H. So F being fax and H being hard copy. Okay, so that's important when you want to choose which contact is going to get delivery and how they're going to get delivered. That's important to check that there. Okay, so now to set up the electronic delivery options for this debtor, press F2 again, and we select electronic number 9. And we get shown this program here, sys-edmnt. But you'll notice we've just drilled down onto just this particular debtor. Okay, and we have this message up here that we have no rules specified for eTechnique, the debtor code, branch 00. Okay, so we're just focusing on this one debtor here, and that can be quite a simple, easy way to set it up, is just to go on a per debtor level and configure the configurations that you need as per the client's request. The layout of the screen is such that we're in the Configure by Contact tab. So you can see we have contacts, Jamie, Pam, Simon, and an additional one, which I'll talk about later. So in here, for each of these contacts, as I said, we can have multiple emails and they'll all be listed there. In the case of you see the 4 contacts there, it's a hard copy output. But we'll just focus at the moment on these ones here. And generally what I would recommend is you want your sort of default scenario to catch all. Let's say that you want contact 1, email 1 to receive all programs. So what we can do is double click that. We are given a list of all the programs available for electronic delivery within the debtors module. Okay, so there's a large number of programs that you can configure and start having automatically sent out via electronic. And we'll just select the checkbox for all of those programs. So now what happens is the message changes because we've started to configure some rules. The message becomes that custom rules have now been specified for this debtor. And what that means is that what the options we have configured here are the boss. Okay, so every time a program gets delivered, it's going to look up these rules, and this is the boss that'll stop here in terms of the hierarchy checking the rules. Okay, so the branch rules won't apply. It's going to be these custom rules. Now, so that we can test this out, I'm going to configure also my personal address here. I'm going to add that, and I'm going to select that to be receive electronic output for stock invoice update and print. So just that one program there, and I save that. So you can see now that Jamie has a tick for electronic delivery. Pam has a cross, so Pam will not be receiving delivery. And Simon also has a tick just for SAINB RPT. So another way to look at it can be the Configure by Program tab. So that's the second tab over here. And this is the same data, just another view and another way of looking at it. So what that means is we can check for stock invoice update and print which contacts and email addresses will receive delivery. So as you can see, as we configured a moment earlier, Jamie's email 1 will receive delivery. Simon Howard email 1 will receive delivery. So that's a handy way to audit which programs will or won't receive delivery and who it's going to go to per debtor. Okay, so I think we're about ready to test that out. I'll just make sure we haven't forgotten anything there, but I think we're all good to go. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and create an invoice for this debtor. Put some things. Okay, and what we're going to do here for this order is we're going to hit direct. That's going to create the invoice and automatically update and print it in stock invoice update and print. Now, as I mentioned earlier, sequence 0 was to go to our printer. So imagine that's now come out at our printer down at the warehouse or wherever where it's going to go with the goods. Okay, in this case, we're just going to print it out to our desktop. Now, because it's hit the electronic option, as I mentioned first, sequence 0 was the print, sequence 1 was electronic. It's recognized that we need to send an email, and it's prompting us for the subject and message template. Okay, so this gives you a final chance to just check and configure your template, and it can be handy here to add an extra note to the subject and body. Okay, you'll notice that there's some special codes, and those special codes are like Outlook replace values that basically will replace at email send time with the correct values. And I'll go into more detail on how to configure all that at the end. So for now, we'll just accept that. Okay, so that's now gone off and we have our print output, which I can show you in here. That's our copy going out with the goods that came out to the printer. And in a couple of moments, I should hopefully receive my email. Here it is. Okay, so automatically I receive my email with the invoice number. Okay, and you can see the amount of information that was these sort of replace codes I was mentioning a second ago, the kind of type of information we have available, the contact name, which is important because the Simon contact, I wasn't contact number 1, I was actually contact number 3. So the address correctly picks up the right contact details in terms of the contact name that you are sending it to. Okay, the debtor name, invoice number, we have information like the date, the sender, the company details as well as address. So all those items are configurable and you can configure the signature how you like and with the correct details that you need. But that's all looking pretty good for the moment. Okay, so I mentioned that our general case for most of the invoices that we're printing and for most of our debtors, they haven't requested an email yet. Okay, so we haven't configured them all to get emails and we don't want them to receive an email. This test debtor was an exception to the rule, so that's why we configured that as a custom rule, but we need to consider our general case. Okay, so the way we program general cases is what we call with branch rules. So branch rules can be configured in the same program, just when it's launched from the your home screen or from the menu there. So the program was SysEDMNT, which is short for Electronic Delivery Contact Maintenance. And when I launch this program from the home screen, you can see now it looks quite different. I have 2 bold branches where I can configure general rules, and I have all my debtors now listed as well. And I can go in and find a particular debtor and see what was configured, which is very, very handy for auditing reference without having to go into the debtors master. So what I'm going to focus on is the branch 00. And you see there's 5 contacts available there. Okay, that's because the most contacts I have on any particular debtor is 5. If you added 20 contacts to one debtor, you would have potentially up to 20 rules available. But obviously something to note is that if you were to assign delivery to contact 20 and most of the debtors only had 2 contacts, then that's not going to work for most of the debtors. So generally best to stick with the ones that you know you have. If you have at least 3 contacts for every debtor, then play around with those 3. Most of the time, a lot of people have contact 1 set up as the recipient of most of their reports. So presently there's no rules specified for eTechnique, but we're going to go ahead and add them. I'm going to double click on contact 1, and I'm going to specify that contact 1 should receive delivery for all programs, which is pretty much what it was before by default. The only exception is I'm going to untick the stock invoice update and print. Okay, so I've ticked everything except the stock invoice update and print. Great, so now we have contact 1, rules defined for programs. There's a select number of programs, so we can't quite list them all there. But as I mentioned earlier, the best way to audit which programs will receive delivery and which ones won't is with the Configure by Program tab. In the Configure by Program tab, if we expand the branch rules for 00, you can see all the programs are listed, and as we are choosing to do, we have none delivered for stock invoice update and print. So that will let you know that there is no contacts receiving delivery for stock invoice update and print. So that's quite handy in this scenario because as we set up in the system forms default maintenance, the first option will be to print, second option will be to send the electronic output, and because we've specified none, for those debtors we haven't set up, nothing's going to happen, which is quite handy. So the debtor that we first picked on in terms of contacts was the Eagle Computer Services, okay? And I'll just confirm if we go into the F2 and look at the electronic output options that we don't have anything specified. So there's no rule specified for this debtor, which means it's going to apply the branch rule that we just set up, which means we can test that out now. We can order some things. Okay, and once again, we'll go direct. So the first output will again print. Great. Now we will receive the subject and message pop-up, and that's only because it's discovered that there's an electronic option, but it hasn't quite understood that this contact won't receive any delivery. So just okay that and understand that that email won't go. Great. So we can check our print output over here. And there's our invoice for Eagle Computer Services, which has gone to the printer. That'll go with the goods. But now we're sort of wondering, how do we verify that we didn't send an email to that customer? How do we know for sure that these rules are working as we would expect? Well, what we can do, there's a couple of different ways. One of them is to use the Nexus email log, which is very, very handy if you're unsure about emailing in general. Okay, so this is available, I think, from 9.5. It just allows you to review all the emails that have been sent from Nexus. So we can just search their email log. There it is. What this gives us is a record and some data associated with all the emails that have gone out of Nexus, including if any have failed for any reason. So it's kind of handy if you're having issues with emailing and you can see that they're coming back with some errors, maybe the server is down, etc. So just to make sure we didn't send an email out to Eagle Computer Services, we can sort by date time and take a look. The last email we sent out was to Simon Howard from invoices at ETQ. Okay, and that was our invoice. And that was the previous data, not the Eagle Computer Services. So that's one way to understand that emails have or haven't gone out as you configured. It can be a little bit tricky to reconcile that with the rules you've set up, particularly when you're first setting them up. So one thing I would recommend, just if you're finding it confusing in the initial setup of your rules, and you're just wanting to verify everything's working correctly, is definitely engage one of our consultants who can help you with that. They have knowledge around this module and they understand it's quite flexible and your requirements will obviously be quite complex as well. So it is possible to do it. It's just a matter of how do you want to approach the problem. And what they can also do for you is enable some logging. Okay, so this is not user configurable. We don't want too many log files going out to the operating folder. But they can turn it on if you're just in the setup phases and you're wanting to review what's going on. So I set that up earlier. Okay, so in our prod folder, we have a new log file, which is for stock invoice update and print for user sys electronic delivery. Now, as I mentioned, this is quite handy to understand what rules applied and who got emailed for what. So we'll just start with the first one, which was at 2:38. Okay, and that was for the data TE00349, and that was by a custom rule as we configured. Okay, so it's letting you know the rules that applied, and that was a custom rule, and then it's going to tell you the output of that, which is like contact one, and the first email for contact one is Jamie Nicholas, and Jamie receives all the programs, and then contact three, which was Simon Howard, and it was my first email, receives select programs, so just a few. Then the next line here was at 2:44, okay, and that was for Eagle Computer Services. And what it's letting us know is that Eagle Computer Services has custom data rules or specified branch rules that do not contain this program. Okay, so they're basically, the output of that is that we didn't email anyone. Okay, so that can be quite handy for understanding when emails are going out, that it can let you know that yes, the rules didn't include this program and that may or may not have been the effect you were desiring. So that's one thing to consider as well. When you see that message, that could be because yes, you've forgotten to add that program, or it could be something deliberate that you've set up. And just one other caveat as well, there can be, if you do see this message appearing in your system message log, depending on what your system configuration is, we've in some circumstances presented that as a warning to the message log, okay? Just because you may or may not be aware that that's happening. If you are aware, there's an option in the control file settings to turn those messages off. But in the first instance, when you're setting up, it can be handy to leave those messages on so that you can make sure that things are behaving the way you would expect. Okay, so that was the case of the invoices, and we've set them up and we've got that working pretty much exactly how we want there. We have our general case considered, which is the majority case, and then we can now go and as debtors ask us to add, they want to get an email copy, we can set that up and specify the email that will get the output there. We're just going to also take a look at the statement. The statement is another common one that people want to have sent out electronically. Okay. In this scenario, it's going to be a little bit different. We don't always have a hard copy that's going out. Okay. Because we're trying to actually cut down on our paper usage and we're trying to email as many people as we can. So in this scenario, we're going to actually have a mixed output. We have some debtors who are a bit more old-fashioned and want to receive something in the mail, and we have some debtors who want to receive things electronically. Okay, so the best way to approach that is to, again, consider the general case, consider what the general case will be, and then also consider each individual debtor as well. So let's consider a scenario where we just want to deliver to, we have both the test debtor before and another one, Young Contractors Pty Ltd. Okay, what I'm going to do is just have a look what's configured already for statement in terms of the rules and then the individual debtors. So in terms of rules, we can go configure by program to have a look, and we can set up a rule against the statement print. You'll see here in statement print at the moment, presently we have contact 1 set up to receive all the statements. Okay, so that can be your general setup in this case, and we're happy with that. And now we'll just go and review our individual debtors. In this case, we're going to look at eTechnique debtor. And as I mentioned before, once we've configured custom rules, okay, those branch rules won't apply for this debtor. These rules will be the rules that apply. Okay, so we need to actually go and double check to make sure that the statement print will go. And presently it's set up to go towards Jamie. Okay, if I had removed that option for Jamie, I had, let's say, untick statement print, okay, and I came to the configure by program tab, you'll notice that statement print is appearing with a none to let us know that we're not receiving delivery for that one. So I'm happy with that. Instead, what I want to do is I want to have the statement go to my address. Okay, now we're happy. We don't have a none anymore. Got that going quite well. Now, actually, what I'll also do is I'll know the next data in the run. We'll just do a couple in the run. Young Contractors Pty Ltd happens to be the next data in the run. We have 2 contacts set up here. They do have emails and phone numbers, but you'll notice that Brunilda is set up with a fax. Okay, that's a preferred delivery at the moment. It's set up with fax there. And then often when you're going through debtors master maintenance screen, I'm sure you're aware, the contact 2 might repeat, and contact 2 at the moment, the preferred delivery is H. Now what that means when we come into our electronic output options, we have 2 options here. Okay, we have one which is go to a fax number. So we can select Brunilda's fax number there to receive delivery. And I must have left this on from before, but at the moment we have Brunilda receiving a hard copy printer for statement print. Okay, so that's what we want for the second one. If someone says that, well, someone hasn't set up their emailing and they don't want an emailed invoice and they just want to receive a printer, this is how you would set that up. Have a hard copy preferred delivery method for a debtor and select that for statement print. Now I'll just quickly touch on what we're going to do in terms of the forms defaults maintenance for the statement print. Right, there we go. So in terms of statement print, the traditional one, okay, we currently have it set up to go to printer, to Microsoft Print to PDF. What I would recommend with something like a statement print where you're not having that run automatically on invoice generation time would be to actually not use system default and have many options. But if you were deliberately doing a statement run and you have everything configured correctly, then you can just select electronic at print time. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Let's going to be fine for that. So I'll just run that now. And as I mentioned here, yes, we haven't set up system default to be electronic, but we can select it as an option here. Once again, we get an option to just amend our message. We could, for instance, say something like that, just to update that, or put some advice in there. Please pay as soon as possible, or whatever you want to put in there. So you'll notice now we get a print output, and that's going to be the print output for our hard copy option, which was for the Young Contractors Pty Ltd. We set up as the hard copy, and we've printed a total of 2 statements there. Once again, I'll just verify what's gone out via our log file. So we have a different file now for statement print. And you'll notice, okay, we have the first header, which is the e-technique, is by custom rule, and we just sent 1 copy to Simon Howard. Okay, the second header was for the Young Contractors Pty Ltd, which was the last one in our statement run. Okay, and contact number 2 is a H1, which is a hard copy, so it goes to the printer, and that was for select programs. So that's exactly the output we wanted there. In this case, we're not using the general rule, but the general rule, if there were any other debtors in that list, would have been to go via the branch rules and go to contact 1. This is our email there. Lost it. Our message that was updated as we required. Okay, and the document type has changed from an invoice to a statement. So that's pretty much how we set up the electronic rules. We've just used a couple of examples there for invoices and statements. And obviously you can apply that to any of the other types of documents that you saw in that list. Now what I'll just touch on is some common scenarios. Let's suppose that we've been given some feedback about our electronic, about our emailing for our statement. Okay, so one thing for the statement that we have had some feedback for is that the address is coming from invoices at ETQ. In terms of the invoice itself, we had some feedback that we didn't see the debtor code on the email, so I'll just bring that up. Someone gave some feedback that they would like to see the debtor code appear on our in our email there, so for quick reference, they can bring that debtor code up. Okay, and there was one more problem. Yes, the from address, debtor code. And I think e-technique, that was the last problem. E-technique has also said they would also like to receive a mail copy. So we can go into how to set that up. So let's go and tackle the email template. The way we can do that is with the Nexus email configuration program. This is ETmail CG. And you can see it's a much more readable format than what we had before. And this is the best way to configure your template. So we have a subject and a body, and we can see the values it's going to be replacing at email time. And they're fairly self-explanatory: doc type, tran number, the recipient master name, the recipient contact, recipient master code, doc type, tran number, month, date stamp, etc. So they're all fairly self-explanatory. What we want to do in this instance, as requested, was to insert the master code. We're just going to put that after the master name, which is effectively the debtor's name. So we can select phrases from the list down below. Okay, and as I said, they're all fairly self-explanatory in terms of what they represent. And in this instance, we're looking for the master code. We'll just insert that. We've lost a line there. So what we'll do is we'll just close our brackets off. And if you need to insert a new line, just press Shift Enter. Okay. In normal Nexus behavior, Enter is going to take us to the next window. So in this instance, just press Shift and Enter together to insert a new line. Go ahead and save that. Okay, so now the next issue was the from address is appearing as invoices at etq.com.au. Okay, so there's a couple of ways in which that can be configured. the boss of those rules in terms of it's a hierarchy of which from address to use, and the boss goes to what is set up in user access maintenance. So you can see our email user in terms of Office 365 is set up as Pam. Okay, and that's who we're going to log in as and use for authenticating for credentials to sending emails. But the from email is here, invoices@etq.com.au. Okay, so that's what it's been picking up for sending, which can be great if you're sending things out on a personal level. But when you're doing a statement run or invoices, you may want to have something that fits better. So we'll just delete that, save that. Now, the next place the rules, the sender address is going to come from is against the branch. So if we go into branch file maintenance, load up our branch, head to screen 3, you can see there's contact information there for accounts receivable module, for anything to do with purchase orders, and anything in the accounts payable module. Okay, so there's 3 distinctions there that you can use in terms of the address you want to pick up. And one important note as well is that the actual address name can change as well, and that'll change the sending name. Okay, so we'll see that in a second. Okay, so we'll just get out of that. Now, the last thing I will mention is that the eTechnique client, as I said before, rang up and said they would also still want to receive a paper statement for their filing cabinet. Okay, so they caved in eventually and kept to the old school. If someone had that scenario, in this, what you could do if you've noticed that your contacts are all of type E, and I had left one there earlier, I'll maybe just delete this one to show you what I'll do. So in this scenario, let's say we have 3 contacts here that are all type E, and we want to print out. Like the contact I just deleted before, my best proposal for this solution would be to add an additional contact that can represent the hard copy output. Okay, so we can add a new contact, and we could just call this accounts or something like that, and just make sure the preferred delivery is H. Okay, so the other details aren't too important there because it's going to be a hard copy printer output. Okay, so with that 4th contact now available, if we head to the electronic output options screen, okay, we now have this accounts hard copy available. And at the moment, they're not receiving any delivery, so we can just double click them and make sure they receive the statement. Okay, if we check by program, you can see they're now listed there to receive the statement also. Okay, so we've fixed about all our problems there, and we are ready to go ahead and test that out. Run this once again, and we'll go to electronic again. And you'll see there's a new code there in our message, so that's come through from our template. Okay, we're going to get 2 print outputs. There's 1, there's 2. Great. And then now we can review our logging. So at 3:20, or sorry, 3:02, I think it is, electronic delivery for that data was by custom rule. 1 went to the email as we had before, but we got an additional printout. And likewise for young contractors was the same with the printout. Let's now just review our email has come through. You'll see here as well now, okay, we have our master code available, which is quite handy now for quick reference. Okay, and the from address is updated as accounts receivable at ETQ rather than the invoices, and the sender is now Daniel instead of Pam. So that's very, very handy for controlling the look and feel of your invoices emails that you send out, and you can play around to get different combinations of things in there. Okay, great. So we've covered a lot of functionality there. We've only been looking at the AR side of things. okay, obviously. And the reason for that is just for simplicity, but I will now mention that all this in functionality is exactly the same in the AP and in the payroll, okay? So I'll just now load up Creditors Master and we can take a look. We can pick on a random data here. Okay, so in the Creditors Master maintenance, the contacts information is on screen 2, okay, and we may or may not have some data populated in there, but we can do the same thing. Going to F2 and maintain the contacts. Okay, and we get the same screen here. The same thing applies. They are synced to contact 1 and 2, especially the email 1, phone number 1 and 2, and the fax number. And we can come in here and start editing this and populating our data in here. Okay, so we might want to have. Okay, so that all applies in much the same way. Likewise with the electronic delivery, if we come into the F2 options, we can maintain electronic output options. Okay, we haven't given a contact name for contact 2 yet, but we have Susan, who is a recipient type of fax. Let's actually fix that up and make her a recipient type of email. Give her an email address as well. So preferred delivery from fax to email. Great. So now we have Susan there configured, which is great. And we can select the electronic delivery that we want to have for that AP contact. Okay, so in this instance, the types of programs you can see is a much shorter list on the AP side, but there's still some useful ones there. So you can separate different contacts to receive the remittances as to who you send the purchase orders to. So that's quite a handy way of differentiating which different emails things will go off to and have that all handled automatically when you raise a purchase order. So in this instance, let's send the remittance advices and the credit notes and things like that to Susan. Okay, and if you notice at the moment now we have none configured for anything on the PO side. So we can add a contact for the PO side. And this might just be a purchasing contact. Sometimes as well, you can be handy with the contacts module. Maybe you don't actually have a specific contact that you want to maintain, but instead you just want to keep a generic purchasing contact. Okay, and that might go to just a generic purchasing phone number, and perhaps the address is something like. Great, now if we go to our electronic output options. We have the purchasing email now available, and we can select delivery for all the purchasing type of reports. If we check by program, now you see all programs are being covered. And so everything on the purchasing side will head to purchasing at Young Motors, and anything on the sort of payments and remittances side will go to Susan. So that's a very, very handy way to have that all set up. And again, the same things apply in terms of the rules, generic rules there. So keep that in mind as well. I won't do any examples of the purchasing side there. We don't have enough time to go through all of that. But I just would like to mention one last thing in terms of the control file options available. So these are the warnings that I mentioned before. Okay, the suppress warnings for electronic delivery that excludes a program. Okay, so you can have that, as I mentioned, that warning may appear in your system message log, not as an error, but as a warning. If you're happy with your setup and configuration, you can set those to Y. Okay, and there also can be a warning for electronic delivery to a blank email or fax. Now that may occur because you've set up a general rule that you would like everything to go to contact 1, but as you saw, sometimes it's quite hard to keep all that data up to date. contact one might not have an email address, and you'll get a warning to let you know that that is going to a blank address. Okay, so yeah, very, very handy to configure those to be suppressed once you've got everything set up correctly. And we also have another option here, which is to suppress the email and subject body prompt for system default electronic. Okay, so what that is in the case where, let's say you're running a statement print and you've configured sequence 0 is to go to the printer and sequence 1 is to check electronic. Okay, if you run that statement print and you hit system default, okay, it's going to repeat that process of checking sequence 0, sequence 1 over and over and over again each time you hit a new data for the next statement. Okay, and so what that means is you would get that pop-up come up on system default every time. Okay, for each new report, you're going to get that pop-up come up. So that allows you to suppress that pop-up when you're on system default. And that can be quite handy as well when you're just doing things to, direct for your invoices and you're happy with your template and you don't want your template to be changed for most of the people who are just hitting direct on their invoices. Same thing, press yes there and that'll be suppressed. Okay, so I think that's about everything there in terms of contacts and electronic delivery. I hope you've found that useful and informative, and hopefully you've learned something new that you might not have known already, or maybe you're new to this whole setup and everything was new for you, which is great. Then hopefully you've learned heaps. We will go through some questions now, see if anything has been answered already, but I might just run over them just in case there's anything I can add. Feel free now, if you have any questions, send them through. We'll stick around as well to answer some. Okay, so the question here is in ETML-CG, can we add our own free text for the statement message? And I think I may have covered that at some point there, basically in terms of the email template you saw. That's that in this screen here. I'll just open it up. You're free to type whatever you want in terms of these messages here. Okay, so I don't know what you might type, but as you can see, you're free to type whatever you want, and that's going to appear on your statement next time. Okay, so the next question is, if an invoice has already been generated and a change is made, will the amended invoice also send? It just depends on what stage you're generating the document. Okay, so if and how you've set up your rules. So yes, if you've set up your stock invoice update and print, as we did earlier with system forms default maintenance, if you configured this report to go to electronic, then yes, if you make a change and run stock invoice update and print again, they're going to get a new email. Okay, so, and that could be what you want, or it might not be. Another way that you can set that up, if you're making lots of changes to your invoice, the customer's always calling up and adding things, or maybe you've generated an invoice and you realize you haven't got stock and you want to do that often. What you can also use is the invoice reprint after end of day. Okay, so that could be something, maybe you don't configure the SAI and VRPT to do electronic, but you configure the reprint after end of day. And in the morning before the truck's ready to go out, you can do a run of that and hit electronic, have the rule set up with whoever has an email will receive an email. Okay, next question is, on the invoice electronic mail, can we suppress the email subject review window? This is because during pop-up during invoicing, the windows would hold the process. Yeah, I think that's what I answered just there at the end. That might have come through before. But yeah, in that system control file options there, that's the best way to do that. So in setup, control file maintenance, against the company and system details, screen 3, this option here. Set that to Y, and basically what that means is if users hit system default, like let's say using direct or just pressing enter, they're just quickly operating, they won't be bothered by that subject and body prompt. Okay, so we have a question here, how do we extract all contacts to Excel? So I'll just run over that again in case you missed that. We covered that in the sort of earlier parts. We can just search for a program in the program tree called Contact Export. Yeah, there it is there. Okay, the master code type you can select as either debtors, creditors, or employees. Okay, hit OK or enter a range if you want a more specific range. And you can see all our contacts appear there. And we can expand each one to see the details for each contact, and that could be multiple contacts and multiple emails per contact, depending on what data you have in the system. Our data isn't looking too great here, but also we couldn't have a lot of contacts in there. So what you can then do is hit File, Save As. Okay, and we're given some options here to export. We can do tab separated, comma separated, but I would recommend the Excel spreadsheet all data. The filtered data will just give you what's on screen at the moment, which means you won't see the inner details of some of the other contacts. But if you hit the all data option, you get everything. Okay, so we have a question, can we have different email messages for different programs? Okay, so not in the default template itself at this stage. So we just have the one email template. It will change the doc type, so it can change from statement to invoice if you use that doc type parameter. So please find the correct document type attached. But the other alternative would be that, let's say you're doing a statement run and you want to put a custom message in. You have the option here to change the message. Okay, so that does give you one last chance to review that and update that. But at this stage, we don't have multiple templates available. Okay, so that's all the questions that we have published at the moment. We will stick around for a little while longer, just answering any more questions. In part, there is a delay on this presentation about Microsoft Teams puts a 40-second delay on the presentation, so we do have to wait around for a few minutes. And if that's why your question isn't being answered straight away, that's why. But otherwise, I hope you have enjoyed the presentation and you've gained something from that. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Please feel free to give us any feedback on these trainings, whether you're finding them helpful and useful and so forth. And I will also mention that the recording will be available. We'll send that out. So if you missed that, or you have some other staff who would like to fill them in on what they've missed, especially as well if you came late. I know we had some issues at the beginning, so we do apologize for the link issues. If you missed anything at the beginning, just double check the recording once we make that available.
Also, if you do miss out and we end it before you've had the opportunity, feel free to send through to help desk if there's something that you need, any questions that haven't been answered, just send it through. Obviously, you may well also want to send something through if any other staff members who missed the beginning or what have you, watch this at a later time. At any time you can ask.
Not sure if we're getting any more questions in. It's hard to know.
It looks like it's slowed down a little bit. Look, guys, as I said, if you miss out, flick an email through to help desk and we'll get your question answered.
45 seconds is a long time to wait. I'm not that patient. I got a message from Pam. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Pam. Say hi to the guys at Global for me. I hope they're all watching in a room together. They can hear me all right.
Okay, guys, thank you very much for your time. We'll end the session now, but feel free to email if you've missed out. Cheers, guys.
Bye.